I heard the gunshot before I even opened my eyes. One sharp crack slicing through the morning like lightning tearing a clear sky apart. And when I looked out my window, still half tangled in my sheets, I saw Titan, my prize bull, my partner, my family stagger, collapse and hit the dirt as a group of armed strangers stood over my land like they owned it. They told me they had permission, from the HOA, from Karen Carter. And right then I knew, this wasn't just trespassing, this was war. I've lived on my family ranch my whole life. 3 generations of Harpers built this place with their hands, their sweat, and their damn stubbornness. The land wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Wide stretches of pasture old oak trees lining the fence barns that smelled like hay and oil and something close to home. The weirdest part? My ranch didn't belong to any HOA, never had. But that never stopped Karen, the self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge HOA, from sticking her nose into every inch of my property like she had a deed tucked under her floral blazer. Karen loved rules the way normal people love their kids. She carried that clipboard everywhere, walking around the neighborhood with that pinched smile like she was auditioning for the role of petty tyrant of the year. And for some reason my ranch, the one place she legally had no power, was her favorite target. She complained about the cows, the smell, the barns, the fences, even the way my grass grew aggressively. If she could have cited me for breathing wrong, she would have. 2 days before the gunshot, I saw tire tracks in the south field. Not mine. Not Joe's. Joe was my next-door neighbor and longtime drinking buddy, and he knew every vehicle that came through these dirt roads. When I told him about the tracks, he chuckled, took a sip of his beer and said, "Heard Karen braggin' last HOA meeting. Said she'd fix the Harper problem once and for all." I shrugged it off. Karen talked big all the time. At worst, I figured she'd file another noise complaint about Titan snorting too loud. But when that shot rang out, every stupid time I brushed her off came crashing back. I flew down the stairs, yanked on my boots, grabbed my phone, and bolted out the door. The morning light hit me full force as I saw them 3 men in camo rifles slung over their shoulders, strolling across my pasture like they were on safari. One even tipped his cap at me like we were neighbors sharing a cup of sugar. "Hey, you're trespassing!" I yelled, sprinting toward them. "Relax, buddy," one hunter said. "We got permission." "From who?" "The HOA lady, Karen." I swear my blood hit boiling point in a single second, but when the tallest guy lifted his rifle casually like he was checking the weather, my stomach dropped. Titan. My Titan had wandered closer to them, curious as ever. I screamed, but the hunter pulled the trigger. The sound didn't echo. It stabbed. Titan buckled, fell hard, and I dropped my own shotgun as I ran to him, sliding through the dirt to cradle his massive head. His breaths were ragged, warm blood pooling under him, soaking into my jeans as I tried to hold him together with my bare hands. "You stupid," I couldn't even finish it. Rage, grief, disbelief, they all tangled up in my throat. One hunter mumbled something about legal game. I looked up at him shaking and said, "This is private land. That bull isn't game. That's Titan. You just shot a champion on my property." Sirens were already wailing in the distance when the sleek white SUV rolled up. Karen stepped out like she was arriving at a photo shoot, sunglasses on clipboard in hand, fake concern plastered across her face. "What is all this commotion?" she asked, voice syrupy sweet. "You," I hissed. "You did this." Karen blinked innocently. "Now, Michael, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding. You forged permission papers. You let armed strangers onto my land, and because of you, Titan," my voice cracked. Titan let out a low groan beside me. But Karen didn't flinch. She just pressed her lips together and said, "Well, perhaps if your ranch were maintained to community standards." I almost lunged at her. Sheriff Miller arrived just in time. I showed him my property records. He questioned the hunters. One handed him the permit, a crumpled piece of paper stamped with some HOA nonsense and a signature that looked suspiciously like Karen's cursive. Miller squinted at it like it smelled bad. Karen, of course, tried to spin the story, claimed she authorized a wildlife control initiative, said Titan was an unpredictable animal, said she was protecting children. From what my grass. But none of the legal arguments mattered in that moment. All I cared about was the vet arriving. Doc Harris knelt beside Titan, checking his pulse, cleaning the wound, whispering, "If he makes it through the next day, he's got a shot." I nodded, wiping my eyes with the sleeve smeared in Titan's blood. When the sheriff finally cuffed Karen for forgery and trespassing, she shrieked like someone had stolen her crown. "I am the HOA president. I have rights." Sheriff Danvers, the no-nonsense type, just shook his head. "Ma'am, what you have is a date with the county judge." Watching her shoved into that squad car should have felt like victory, but it didn't, because Titan was barely holding on. I stayed by his side at the animal hospital all night. I wasn't sure which hurt worse, watching him fight for every breath or replaying Karen's smug face over and over. Around 4 a.m., when exhaustion finally pinned me to a chair, the doubts crept in. Maybe I should have acted sooner. Maybe I ignored too many warning signs. Maybe in some twisted way this really was my fault. For the first time since I could walk, I felt powerless. But the next morning something changed. Neighbors started calling not to accuse me but to warn me. Karen was already spreading lies, talking to reporters, painting herself as the victim, claiming the hunters were misled by a volatile landowner. Volatile. Me. The guy who literally begged the hunters not to shoot. That snapped something in me. If Karen wanted war, then fine. I'd give her one. Joe was the first to step up. He agreed to testify, said he'd heard Karen plotting the whole thing. Then I dug into my trail cams. Hours of footage later, there she was, Karen Carter herself, handing maps to the hunters, pointing at my fence line, laughing as she said, "He never pays attention anyway." A smoking gun captured in HD. I took it straight to Sheriff Danvers. He watched the footage with that slow, simmering anger only old sheriffs have. When it ended, he let out a low whistle. "Well, son, you just buried her." Karen wasn't going down easy, though. She held a community meeting at the HOA clubhouse. I went. Not to listen, just to see how far she'd push the lies. She stood at the podium in a bright blue dress, voice trembling with fake sincerity. She talked about safety, about the well-being of Maple Ridge, about being wrongfully accused by an unstable rancher. I raised my hand, waited for her to nod, then held up a flash drive. "I've got video," I said. "Full audio, start to finish." The room went dead quiet. Karen went pale. People started murmuring. Joe coughed loudly, more like a laugh. Karen tried to regain control, babbling about doctored footage, but nobody bought it. The tide had turned. After that, I didn't wait. I filed the civil lawsuit, damages, veterinary costs, emotional distress, and punitive fees. It was the kind of lawsuit that made her rich husband swear loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Meanwhile, Titan fought. He stood for the first time a week later, leaning against the stall rails like an old king refusing to fall. When I walked in, he lifted his head, those dark eyes locked on me, and something inside me steadied. If Titan wasn't giving up, then neither was I. Word spread. Neighbors who'd been too scared of Karen for years came forward. One elderly woman handed me HOA meeting minutes she'd saved just in case that woman ever snapped. The whole community started waking up. By the time Karen's hearing rolled around, the courthouse looked like a state fair. People packed the benches. Reporters hovered outside. Even folks who'd never spoken to me before shook my hand on the way in. Karen sat at the defendant's table in full makeup armor, trying to look confident, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Her lawyer kept whispering frantically while she nodded like one of those dashboard bobbleheads. Evidence after evidence stacked against her: the fake permit, the video footage, the vet bills, the witness testimonies, the HOA minutes showing years of power abuse. At one point, Karen tried to stand and give a speech about misunderstandings. The judge slammed her gavel. "Sit down, Mrs. Carter." When the judge read the verdict, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty, on every count. Karen swayed like she'd been punched. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off, eyes wide, mouth trembling. Then came the sentence: $250,000 in fines and damages. 10-year ban from any HOA leadership. A restraining order: she couldn't come within 200 yards of me or Titan. And best of all, mandatory community service at the county animal shelter. The look on her face, that was the real justice. The judge dismissed the court. Reporters swarmed. Karen bolted out a side door, blocking her face with her purse as cameras flashed like fireworks. Me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just took a slow breath and walked outside, feeling the weight finally lift off my shoulders. I wasn't happy. I was done. After everything, every threat, every lie, every smear, every drop of Titan's blood, Karen Carter had finally fallen. And not because I'd yelled the loudest or fought the hardest or played dirty like she did. She fell because the truth doesn't stay buried forever, and people eventually get tired of being ruled by fear. In the end, there's only one thing I took from all of this, one simple truth that stuck with me. If you don't stand up for what's yours, someone like Karen will be more than happy to take it.